So I've owned this performance Tesla Model Y. It's a 2021 model for a year and a month now. And I want to talk to you guys about my ownership experience. I've driven it for 11,000 miles, and I want to tell you guys about the good, the bad, and things I wish I would have known before buying a Tesla. So if you're looking to buy a Tesla, I hope you find this video useful. Let's go ahead and start off with the buying process. It's not done in a traditional manner, in the sense where you go to a dealership, you test drive the vehicle, and then you spend about 2 to 3 hours negotiating on a price. No, it's actually much simpler. It's like buying an iPhone. You go to the Tesla website, you figure out what color you want, you spec it out, which by the way, aren't very many options, and then you place your order. The beauty about buying a Tesla this way is that you don't have to worry about paying a dealership markup. Basically, Tesla is selling directly to the consumer, which means that at the time of purchase, everybody is paying the exact same price. Now, keep in mind, depending on the configuration that you get, it can take up to several weeks to even months before getting your Tesla. For example, I placed my order on September 8th of 2020, and I didn't take delivery until December 27th, 2020, which was over 3 months. One thing you do have to look out for when buying a Tesla is that they refresh their cars constantly. It's not like your traditional car manufacturers. Like for example, if you bought a Ford Mach-E in January of 2021, or if you bought it in October of 2021, you're pretty much getting the exact same car. That's not the case with Tesla. Tesla is constantly evolving every day, every week, every month. Something is changing. Like for example, 1 month, it could just be a bunch of sensors that nobody will notice. And then the following month, it could be something a lot bigger, like for example, adding dual pane windows or a headlight redesign. Or they can also remove parts. For example, my Model Y comes with radar sensors and also lumbar support for the passenger seat, which have now been removed. And that could be the most frustrating part about buying a Tesla, is getting the most up-to-date model at the time of purchase. I want to quickly go over my delivery process, which by the way, was very painless. I was in and out in less than 30 minutes. Now, I know you hear a lot of horror stories of people saying, oh my gosh, the build quality of Teslas is terrible. And I'm going to be honest, it's really a case-by-case scenario. For example, when I inspected my Model Y, there wasn't really anything that stood out that made me want to reject my delivery. Everything was pretty much rock solid, and I was very happy. However, there were a few things that popped up a few weeks later. For example, I was driving behind a pickup truck, and I noticed from the reflection of the bed that my headlights just looked a bit off. So when I got home, I noticed that the passenger side LED lights, they weren't looking the same, and it turns out that not all of them were turning on. So here's the thing, if I had a different car manufacturer, I would have to take it to the dealership, I would most likely have to drop it off, get a rental, and pick it up the following day. That's not the way it works with Tesla. With Tesla, you go into the app, you schedule a service appointment, and basically most small to medium-sized repairs get done at your home or any location that you specify. And I know a lot of people are gonna say, Armando, this shouldn't have happened. Like, this car is brand new. And here's the thing, I've owned many cars, probably around 40, even from some prestigious car manufacturers. And I can tell you, within the first year, I've always had something go wrong. But that's the thing, with Tesla, it wasn't an inconvenience for me at all. In fact, the same thing happened with the spoiler. This was coming off within I think a month or two because it's held on by double-sided tape. I just scheduled an appointment. Tesla actually came to my home. They actually gave me a brand new one, and once again, wasn't an inconvenience to me at all. Now, in the year that I've owned my Tesla, aside from those 2 incidents, I did have one major problem occur, and that's the AC compressor went out. I did have to take it to my nearest Tesla service center, which lucky for me is only a 10-minute drive. Now, I didn't know what to expect, but when I got there, they had a Tesla Model S ready for me. I was able to drive it unlimited miles, free supercharging. Now I understand this is going to be a case-by-case scenario. Every Tesla service center is different, and I picked up my car 5 days later, and since then, I haven't had any problems at all. Now let's go ahead and talk about the driving experience and the transition going from a gas-powered vehicle to an electric one. The biggest change that you'll notice when driving an electric vehicle is what most people call the one-pedal driving. And you get used to driving this way. For example, right now, if I let off the accelerator, it automatically starts to slow down. Now this is due to the regenerative braking that the car has. Now the benefit of this is that essentially you're recharging your batteries as this is happening, which means that you're going to have a longer range. Another benefit too is that you're also going to use your brakes less. For example, I've gone weeks driving my Tesla and sometimes I never use my brakes. But again, you get used to driving this way. For example, if there's a stop sign coming up, which I'll just stop right here, I'm not braking right now. I'm literally letting off the accelerator and the car will come to a stop. And you see, that's the thing about owning a Tesla or an electric vehicle for that matter, is that you really don't have to worry about any maintenance at all. Like for example, there's no oil changes or air filters that you have to replace. You know, long term, there's also timing belts. You have transmission fluid and, spark plugs, which can be very costly in an internal combustion engine. Something else that's very different from a gas-powered vehicle to an electric one is the instant torque that you get. And let me tell you, it never gets old. I gotta say, and I've said this before, you can have the crappiest day, and I tell you, you just smash on that pedal and it just puts a smile on your face. Now, as much as I love to drive, one of my favorite things about owning a Tesla is having the full self-driving option. Essentially, it drives you from point A to point B with very little interaction. But I can't tell you how useful this has been, especially on longer road trips. Now, let me be clear, this isn't full autonomy where you can just sit back, relax, fall asleep, and not pay attention like a passenger. But I will say it does remove a lot of the stress from driving. And longer road trips, as I mentioned, feel like you just cut them in half. Now, something else I like about the Model Y is how comfortable these seats are. I'm very impressed. Like, these things feel like you're sitting in a lazy boy chair. In fact, many people that sit here for the very first time tell me, wow, these seats are comfortable. And I've driven other cars around the similar price point, like an Audi SQ5. That was my previous car, which I had for 3 years. Also had a Macan GTS for about a month. And I can tell you, these things are fantastic. Now, they do come in two different types of colors. You can get them in black, or as I did, I got them in white. And I was a bit hesitant at first, and I'll tell you my experience with the white color, because I do have kids, and I thought, well, with white, you could probably see more wear and tear, and it might be a little harder to clean. But surprisingly, in terms of cleaning, they've been pretty easy. Now, my only complaint is after a month of having my son's car seat in the back, it did leave a print on the seat, which I have not been able to remove. I've gone on forums, I've talked to experts, I've used a bunch of different products, and it has gotten a little bit better, but you could still see a stain on there. People recommend that you put a seat protector, which I have now done. And if I had to do it over again, I would still get the white seats, because for me personally, I just like the look and it makes it feel like a spaceship. Since we're in the topic of the interior of the Model Y, you can see it's very basic and minimal and almost no physical buttons. Most of the adjustments that you want to do will have to be done through this display. For example, even the glove box, there's no physical button I can push. I'd have to go in here and then push this icon that says glove box to open it, or I can also use voice commands and say open glove box. And the same goes for adjusting the heating and air conditioning. If you want to adjust the airflow, you do it through the display. There's no vent that you can move up or down or even open and close. And this has been a love-hate relationship with this car. Some of the easier things just feel so convoluted. For example, Tesla just recently did a software update that honestly feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And some of the easier things to do are now hidden in a menu system that requires 2 or 3 steps to dive into it just to access it, where before it was literally 1 push of a button away. And this is why I'm not gonna spend too much time talking about the UI and how things work, because it's constantly evolving and many of these complaints can be fixed with a software update. And honestly, this is where Tesla vehicles really shine. The over-the-air software updates is really what makes this car great. For example, being able to have a live view of the cameras on my car when I'm away is something I didn't have when I first bought the car. And the same goes for all the new games and entertainment that has been added that wasn't there prior to buying it. So overall, it is constantly improving. Another adjustment and something that changes your driving experience is having to charge your vehicle as opposed to filling it up with gas, which, by the way, there's pros and cons to that. And I'll tell you guys what my experience has been. So Tesla claims that this performance Model Y will give you an EPA rating of 303 miles. Now, I've taken many road trips to Sedona in Arizona. I've gone to Las Vegas several times, and I can tell you, even leaving my house at 100% charge and setting this to autopilot, the best I'm able to get realistically is about 200 to 220 miles. Now, I live 225 miles away from Las Vegas, and even if I leave my house with 100% and I set my car to full self-driving, meaning it's going to be the most efficient way, I will still need to stop at a supercharger for about 5 minutes. Now, this isn't a deal breaker per se, but it's one of those things I did wish I would have known before buying my Tesla, because maybe I would have gone for the long-range model. Now, I understand that the 303 EPA rating that Tesla puts on their website is a best case scenario, but I also didn't expect it to be 100 miles less. Now, keep in mind that weather conditions will also affect the range of your vehicle. As I said at the very beginning of this video, I've owned my Model Y now for a year and a month to be exact. And since then, I've noticed what's called battery degradation, which, by the way, it's completely normal. So you know when you buy a smartphone and then maybe like a year or two later, the battery just doesn't hold up like it did when you first bought it? That's exactly what happens with the Model Y, or just any electric vehicle for that matter. And here's the thing, when I first bought the car, it said that I had 303 miles of range, which we all know that it's not actually true. Well, now when I fully charge the car, it says that I have 280 miles of range, which is 23 miles less. Now, for me, it's not that big of a deal because most of my driving is locally, and usually at most I drive 150 miles, which means I can go to my destination and still arrive home with one charge. But that's something that you guys should keep in mind, especially if you have to do long commutes, because that could be the difference of getting a particular model versus the long range one. Now, since we're in the topic of charging, one of the benefits of owning an electric vehicle is that most of the charging will be done at home. Just like you charge your smartphone at home, I do the same thing with my Tesla. I plug it in at night, and when I wake up, essentially it has a full charge. I usually charge it to 80% to preserve battery. And that's the beauty of having an electric vehicle, is that you don't really need to visit, gas stations, or in my case, a supercharger station, because like I said, most of the charging will be done at home. Now, there's a big debate when having to fill up a car with gas for a couple of minutes versus having to supercharge a Tesla for 15 to 30 minutes. And this has been my experience. For me, it really isn't an inconvenience to have to supercharge, because I would have made those stops anyway to either get food, to go to the restroom, or just rest. I will say that you do have to be a little bit more methodical in trip planning. Let me give you an example. When we went to Sedona in Arizona, we actually stayed at an Airbnb in Scottsdale. And in order for us to go from Scottsdale to Sedona and back, we actually have to supercharge one time for about 45 minutes. Now, we had planned to eat breakfast in Scottsdale, but instead what we decided to do is eat at a cafe right next to the supercharger station in Sedona. And that's exactly what we did. We got up early in the morning, we drove to Sedona, headed to the supercharger station, and then right next door we had breakfast. Now, while we were eating breakfast, we didn't have to worry about it because we're eating breakfast and the car is supercharging. 45 minutes later, we get out and now it's at 100%. We do our road trip, we get back to Scottsdale, and it never really felt like we had to stop. Another perk that I've noticed of owning an electric vehicle is if you go to the mall, a theme park, or even a hotel, in most cases, they offer free supercharging. Like for example, I told you guys, we love to go to Las Vegas, and usually when I arrive to Las Vegas, I have about 10% battery life. So I tell the valet driver, can you please put it on the charger? And they do. And then whenever I need my vehicle, it basically has a full charge. Now picture this for a second. Imagine driving your gas vehicle. You go to the valet guy and say, hey boss, can you please top it off with gas? It's just not gonna happen. So I find that people who don't own a Tesla talk about the inconvenience of charging. Personally, in my experience, there really hasn't been one. In fact, I find not being able to fill up my gas vehicles at home more of an inconvenience, especially now that gas prices have skyrocketed. It's never been more cheaper to commute. And to give you an example of that, to fill up my Tesla Model Y with electricity, literally from almost 0 to 100%, it cost me less than $10 to do that. Now, to put everything in perspective, last year when I drove 11,000 miles, I spent $573.91 in home electricity, which averages out to $47.82, which is significantly cheaper than what I was paying with my Audi SQ5. Now, mind you, gas prices have increased, so most likely it would be much higher. So in the year that I've owned my Model Y, my overall experience has been good. And if I had to do it all over again, I would definitely buy it again. There's no other car right now that fits my needs like the Model Y. The performance, feature set, and tech really set it above anything else. And this car with every update feels new again and exciting that just makes you fall in love all over again. So if you ask me, would you recommend buying a Tesla Model Y? My answer would be 100% yes, without a doubt.